Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to completely shatter a very common, honestly pretty stubborn assumption today. See, we usually think that building wealth is this insanely complex mathematical equation, right? Like you need a genius-level IQ, an Ivy League degree, or some crazy advanced understanding of numbers. But think about it. If finance was just pure, raw calculation, the richest people in history would be folks like Albert Einstein or Isaac Newton, but they weren't. As we'll see today, wealth actually depends almost entirely on your behavior, not your math skills.
To really get this, consider this ultimate paradox. Back in 2014, a 92-year-old guy named Ronald Reed passed away. Now, he spent 25 years pumping gas and another 17 years sweeping floors as a janitor. Nothing flashy, yet he died with $8 million in the bank. $8 million! Meanwhile, around that exact same time, a guy named Richard Fuscone went totally bankrupt. And Richard, he was Harvard educated. He was a former vice chairman at Merrill Lynch. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth does a gas station janitor die a multimillionaire while a top-tier financial executive loses the whole shebang?
Well, the answer points to our foundational takeaway. Financial success is overwhelmingly dictated by your psychology. Literally, finance is the one field where a completely uneducated person can absolutely crush a certified genius. And why is that? Because wealth isn't about your brain power at all. It's about your ego. It's about how you manage your greed, your fear, and ultimately your emotional control.
You know, we all love to judge other people's financial decisions. We see someone take out a huge loan for a new iPhone, or maybe they just hoard cash under the mattress, and we think, man, they're crazy. But here's a reality check for us all. 0.0001%. Our own personal lived experience makes up barely a fraction of a percent of how the world actually works. Yet, we let that tiny sliver dictate about 80% of how we think the world operates. We just assume our personal experience is the absolute undisputed truth.
But honestly, no one is actually crazy. Let's look at two totally different people, one born in 1950 and the other in 1970. The 1950s baby started investing in their 20s during a massive, roaring market boom. So to them, the stock market is this magical place that just prints money. But the 1970s baby, they hit their 20s during a brutal economic crash. To them, the market feels like a rigged casino that ruins lives. Neither person is crazy here. Their financial worldview is just biologically hardwired by the specific economic era they happen to live through.
And we see this everywhere, even with huge celebrities. Take the legendary Indian cricketer MS Dhoni. The guy has a net worth in the thousands of crores, right? Yet he still heavily invests in physical real estate and farming. Why? Because his early days, back when he was earning just 3,300 rupees a month as a railway ticket collector, permanently framed his view on what security means. Meanwhile, modern youth who grew up during the internet boom, they see security in tech startups and crypto. Everyone's playing the exact same game but with entirely different rulebooks written by their own pasts.
Speaking of the rules of the game, let's talk about a massive illusion we all fall for. The idea that success is purely the result of hard work. Take Bill Gates. Is he brilliant? Absolutely. But his success also involved 1 in a million luck. Out of roughly 300 million high schoolers back in 1968, only about 300 went to Lakeside School, which happened to have a computer terminal. Gates was one of them. But there's a really tragic flip side to this. His equally brilliant friend and co-founder, Kent Evans, faced the exact same 1 in a million odds, but he drew the risk card. He tragically died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated.
This brings us to a massive, massive psychological trap we all step into: survivor bias. We totally worship the one startup founder who dropped out and made billions, right? But we completely ignore the thousands of others who worked just as hard, made the exact same choices, but just got wiped out by bad luck, a market crash, or some unpredictable black swan event. When we mistake extreme luck for reproducible talent, we end up making really terrible financial decisions. And speaking of terrible decisions, we've got to talk about the disease of more. It literally ruins absolute geniuses. Look at Rajat Gupta. He was the global head of McKinsey, worth $84 million. But he sat in boardrooms with billionaires, felt poor in comparison, committed insider trading, and lost his freedom. Same with Harshad Mehta. He had unimaginable wealth, the luxury cars, the whole 9 yards, but threw it all away in a massive scam. Both of these guys had everything you could ever want, but they severely lacked the behavioral discipline to just say, okay, I have enough.
The science behind this endless greed is actually fascinating. It's known as the hedonic treadmill. See, earning those millions feels amazing at first, but neuroscience shows us that dopamine actually rewards the anticipation of the win, not the win itself. Once you finally get the money or that luxury car, the dopamine flatlines. You feel empty, and you immediately start craving the next million to fill the void. You're just running tirelessly on a treadmill, but you never actually get anywhere.
So how do we beat this? Well, the legendary scientist Stephen Hawking, who was paralyzed at just 21, totally understood this trap. He once said that after turning 21, everything else in his life was just a bonus. His personal formula for happiness was simple: results minus expectations. The only way to actually win this impossible game of capitalism and constant comparison is to keep your ego and your expectations firmly in check. Seriously, figuring out what enough means to you is the most vital financial behavior you can ever cultivate.
Now, this psychological limitation also deeply affects our behavior with compounding. Honestly, our biology kind of prevents us from understanding it. Think about it. If I ask you to add 8 9 times, you instantly know it's 72. That's linear thinking. It's easy. But if you multiply 8 by 8 9 times over, your brain basically crashes. It doesn't end in the thousands. It exponentially explodes to over 134 million. As humans, we're evolutionary hunters. We expect linear results, not exponential explosions.
And that evolutionary blind spot is exactly why we struggle so much with investing. Remember Grace Groner? She was an orphan secretary who bought 3 shares of Abbott Labs for $180 back in 1935. She never traded, she never checked stock charts, she just sat perfectly still and reinvested her dividends for 75 years. When she passed away, she left behind $7 million. It just goes to show that in the game of wealth, the simple behavior of supreme patience is a way bigger superpower than any stock-picking talent.
We always obsess over Warren Buffett's stock picks, but want to know his real secret? Over 99% of his $145 billion net worth came after his 50th birthday. Wrap your head around that. If Buffett had started investing at 30 and retired at 60, nobody would even know his name today. His unmatched skill isn't just picking the right stocks, it's his ironclad discipline. He allowed his assets to compound, totally uninterrupted, for 8 straight decades.
We see that exact same compounding magic with India's legendary investor Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. He didn't make his immense fortune by day trading. No, he bought Titan shares at just 30 rupees in 2002 and held on to them for 2 straight decades. He held through the 2008 global crash, through demonetization, even through the massive COVID-19 crash. He never panicked. Like he famously said, the absolute most underrated skill in investing is just the ability to sit still.
So here's a massive shift in perspective. Making money and keeping it require 2 entirely different brains. Getting wealthy demands extreme optimism, right? You have to take risks. You have to have boundless confidence. But staying wealthy, that requires the exact opposite. It demands a healthy dose of paranoia, a bit of fear, and a fierce survival mindset. Often, the very confidence that made you rich in the first place is exactly what destroys you if you don't shift your behavior in time.
The completely contrasting fates of the Ambani brothers is a perfect real-world illustration of this. Both brothers inherited a massive, equal empire. Anil relied on aggressive expansion and endless debt. He basically operated with this feeling of sheer invincibility. But when the market shifted, he had no safety net and went to zero. Mukesh, on the other hand, survived by building a paranoid margin of safety. He built a financial buffer and never drowned his core business in irreversible debt. One brother played to never lose, while the other played to merely survive.
If you manage to stay in the game long enough without losing your nerve, you get to experience what we call tail events. This means you can actually be wrong most of the time and still end up a billionaire. Take the art collector Heinz Bergrun. He bought thousands of paintings, and frankly, 99% of them were absolute junk that lost money. But that 1%? Those were Picasso and Matisse masterpieces that paid for literally all the losses and made him one of the wealthiest collectors ever. Walt Disney did the exact same thing. Hundreds of failed cartoons completely saved by one massive hit, Snow White.
The legendary investor George Soros brilliantly captured this exact mindset. He pointed out that you really don't need a perfect report card. You just need to survive your small losses long enough to hit that one massive, life-changing tail event. Think about it. If you panic and sell everything the minute you face a loss, you take yourself out of the game completely. Mere survival is what eventually allows you to get lucky.
So if wealth is really all about survival and patience, what's the ultimate purpose of having money anyway? Let's look at the man-in-the-car paradox. When a super flashy Ferrari drives by, you never look at the driver and think, wow, what a smart, respectable person. No way. You just look at the car and imagine yourself driving it. People buy these luxury items to get respect, completely unaware that strangers aren't admiring them at all. They are just admiring the object.
Because here's the absolute truth. Real wealth is what you don't see. Vijay Mallya famously burned his fortune on highly visible flash, private jets, sports teams, custom water bottles, literally all just to impress strangers, which completely destroyed his margin of safety. Now contrast that with Radhakishan Damani, the founder of D-Mart. He quietly built a $25 billion empire, and he did the whole thing wearing a simple, inexpensive white shirt and pants. Wealth isn't the money you spend, it's the money you keep.
So, why do we even want this hidden wealth? Well, the highest dividend money pays isn't a fancy luxury watch or some giant mansion. It is the absolute independence to wake up every single morning and decide exactly what you want to do with your time. It's having the behavioral freedom to walk away from a toxic boss or to survive a sudden medical emergency without completely panicking, and to just work at your own pace. That's the real prize.
And this is exactly why Nitin Kamath and his brother bootstrapped their brokerage firm, Zerodha. They literally turned down billions of dollars in VC funding. Why on earth would they do that? Because they understood that taking that money meant handing over the steering wheel of their lives to someone else. They consciously chose their freedom and peace of mind over visible, flashy wealth. And ironically enough, that very behavioral choice made them billionaires anyway.
So, to survive this incredibly psychological game of money, you really have to change your behavior. We need to stop worshiping extreme one-in-a-million luck. We need to manage our egos and figure out when we actually have enough. We have to build an unbreakable margin of safety so that a single bad event doesn't completely wipe us out. And most importantly, we just need to sit still and let time and compounding do the heavy lifting for us.
I'm going to leave you with this final thought to take away from this explainer today. Are you playing a stressful, endless game just to impress total strangers on the street? Or are you finally going to start building the hidden wealth required to buy your ultimate permanent freedom? Remember, it's all about your behavior, not just your math. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and we'll see you next time.